All right, welcome back to Straight Talk. Every Saturday night at 8 o'clock and every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I just got back, well, we just got back from the store, so kind of running up against the clock here, but we have a hell of a show tonight. Not going to be here long. It seems that the world has inevitably changed, and that it's not going to be long before the black man and black people worldwide are in control economically, politically, spiritually, and physically in terms of military prowess and power. The white boy done fucked up. The petrodollar is no more. It is now the petro yuan or the petro whatever the Iranian currency is. And eventually, when they determine the unit, which is the currency of the global south, and the Africoin. So we're going to be looking at quite a bit of information that will just blow your socks off. And I'm here to tell you that it's not going to be long. Truth has a way of showing itself always in the light. You cannot hide it forever like the sun on the moon. And it's just a matter of time. This white boy is nasty and dirty, and you can't rule the world like that. Evil will always destroy itself, and those who partake in it always, ALAYS, WAYS, sorry, and always, ALLWAYS. So we're going to be looking at quite a few things tonight. And I'm here to tell you the changing of the guard is here. There's no ifs, there's no ands, there's no buts. It's always a matter of time. Hold on. So before I do that, let me go to this share screen because we got quite a few, well, not quite a few videos, but at least the ones that I felt were worthy of tonight's show that make the point that I want to make. So here we are. We got Trump threatening the world, in particular Iran, with a nuclear bomb. The bitch ain't gonna do shit. If he does, it's gonna be hell to pay. If he does, it is going to be hell to pay. Hell is already being paid. I don't know what else is far worse than that. But I'm telling you that there is nothing stopping the takeover. You see, God works in mysterious ways, I guess. In the mysterious way, you do the right thing, the right will follow you. If you do the wrong thing, wrong will follow you. It never fails. You see, this white boy been in control for 150 years. Got a 400-year start, and he still fucked up. Because he doesn't have a righteous bone in his body. He thinks that his way of doing things, I'm white, and I say so, it's the best way, and it's not. The best way is mine. You see, being a Jew that I am, is not a religion. It is a way of life to help you find the way of life for you. And the overarching goal for Jews is Tikkun Olam, the healing of the world. How can I make it better? By giving a hand here, a kind word there, you know how it goes. And I struggle every day, not in a bad way, but in a good way, to make sure that I am living a prosperous life because I follow the laws of money, and I live a virtuous life with integrity, kindness, generosity, the whole nine. And so when you are strapping on the armor of God, you can't do wrong. You're going to do right because that is the overarching movement and mentality in your soul, mind, heart. Your words are what they are because it's based in um, fixing the street. It's based in reality. If I say I'm going to help somebody, I'm going to help. Period. So the reality is that white people don't understand. They never will understand it. The only thing they brought to the table of humanity are the 4 Ds: death, destruction, disease, and despair. They've never created one civilization ever. Every civilization was created by black people for the greater good of humanity, the summum bonum of humanity. Does that mean we're perfect, black people? No. There are going to be people who kill people, people who rape people, people who spit on the ground for paper. But the overarching angle of that is righteousness, justice, truth. We're anchored and we must obey the same ethics of our ancestors. They are the root of our being. And so tonight we're going to look at quite a few of what is going on with Trump, what is going on in the Middle East, and how that is affecting us generally and specifically. And as I look through this video, which is about 10 minutes long, it said disastrous news for Trump after threatening Iran as Pakistan shock world. I'll be right back.
It feels like the entire Middle East has become a powder keg with a lit fuse, but what's happening right now, in this very moment, goes far beyond the usual geopolitical chess match. We are witnessing a complete collapse of diplomacy on a scale we haven't seen in decades, triggered by a single explosive social media post from Donald Trump. In what might be the most dangerous development yet in this brutal conflict, Pakistan has abandoned its much-hyped role as a regional mediator, and they haven't just stepped back from the table, they've flipped the table and are now taking a hardened military posture against Israel.
We're giving them till tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and after that, they're going to have no bridges, they're going to have no power plants. Iran has responded to Pakistan's ceasefire initiative demanding a permanent end to the war.
Recovery teams rushed to several sites in Iran that have come under US-Israeli attacks. One of the strikes hit a Jewish synagogue. Iranian media reports the building was completely destroyed and Torah scrolls remain under the rubble.
One last chance. Get full access to TradingView, completely free for 1 full year. Unlock pro-level charting tool, get unlimited smart alerts, enjoy VIP priority support, advanced screeners, full market depth, and yes, zero commissions.
Hold on.
Professional trading tools can cost thousands.
At the same time, the Islamic Republic of Iran, in a move dripping with historical gravity, has permanently severed all diplomatic channels with the United States. This came directly after Trump issued a threat that most legal experts are now calling a textbook definition of a genocidal intent, vowing to obliterate the very civilization of Iran if Tehran didn't cave to his demands by 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We're not just talking about airstrikes on military bases anymore. We are talking about the open targeting of bridges, railway systems, and power plants, the lifeblood of an entire nation. Let's be brutally honest about what is unfolding. This isn't about nuclear weapons or regional stability, no matter how the mainstream media tries to spin it. This is Donald Trump, intoxicated by his own power, lashing out with the explicit goal of securing a temporary ceasefire. Why a ceasefire? It's not to save lives, despite the sanctimonious rhetoric from the White House. It is to allow the exhausted American and Israeli air forces to regroup, rearm, and then launch the final battle that Trump has bragged about for years, the ground invasion to seize Iran's oil fields. We have the receipts. Trump himself recently mused openly about blowing everything up and taking over the oil. And the only thing standing in the way of that naked colonial ambition is the resistance of the Iranian people. The Trump administration and its puppet masters in Tel Aviv are using the cover of negotiations to buy time. But Tehran saw through instantly. Iran's leadership, having survived decades of sanctions and assassination attempts, knows that a pause in bombing would simply mean a prelude to a full-scale ground invasion aimed at regime change and resource theft. That is why they did the unthinkable. They shut the door completely, telling the world they will not be part of this sick, theatrical game of good cop/bad cop. And, in a shocking twist that the Pentagon didn't see coming, Pakistan, a nuclear-armed nation with its own massive military, has now broken ranks, essentially telling the Zionists that they are no longer a neutral party and will respond militarily. This is the kind of domino effect that turns a regional skirmish into a world war. Before we go deeper into how Pakistan's shift changes everything, we need to talk about the absolute moral depravity we just witnessed from the U.S. Air Force. If you are disgusted by what you are hearing, please hit that like button, share this video with everyone you know, and drop a comment. Even just a single dot helps overpower the algorithm that tries to hide this truth. Subscribe to support journalism that refuses to carry water for war criminals. Now, let's get into the devastating details. You won't hear this on the nightly news, but Iran is currently under a sustained assault against its civilian infrastructure that has already killed thousands of innocent people. Just hours before Trump's civilization deadline, a massive wave of joint U.S.-Israeli airstrikes hammered key locations across the country. In the central city of Kashan, a vital railway bridge was struck directly. According to Iranian state media and regional security officials, that attack alone killed at least 2 people and left 3 others wounded. A senior regional security official named Akbar Salehi confirmed the devastation, stating that the bridge carrying the railway line was a clear target. But it didn't stop there. Outside the holy city of Qom, another bridge was hit. In a display of indiscriminate warfare, a key highway linking the northern metropolis of Tabriz to the capital, Tehran, was also bombed shut about 90 kilometers outside of Tabriz. Even the commuter belt around Tehran wasn't safe. The Maizan news agency reported a strike on railway tracks in Karaj, where images on the ground show Red Crescent rescuers desperately carrying an injured man on a stretcher through the rubble. This was not a precision strike on a military barracks. This was a coordinated attack designed to cripple a nation and terrorize its people, forcing them to demand their government surrender to Trump's extortion. While the bombs were falling, the rhetoric in Washington reached a fever pitch of fascistic bravado. The response from the international legal community was immediate and damning. Brian Finucane, a senior advisor to the U.S. program at the International Crisis Group, pointed directly to 18 U.S. Code Yeshar Yinamanda 91, the U.S. law that prohibits genocide committed by American nationals. Dylan Williams, Vice President for Government Affairs at the Center for International Policy, went even further, stating on X that Trump's statement meets the threshold for intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national group. He warned that if any Iranians are killed pursuant to that threat, Trump is guilty of genocide. But here's where the hypocrisy gets so thick you could cut it with a knife. Even Donald Trump's most loyal foot soldiers, the MAGA base, the Alex Joneses, the Tucker Carlsons, are turning on him. We are seeing a rebellion in real time. Tucker Carlson, who usually bends the knee to Trump, called the bombing of Iranian civilian infrastructure absolutely disgusting and evil and unacceptable from a moral standpoint. Alex Jones, the king of conspiracy theories, admitted this was a gigantic problem, lamenting that America was supposed to be first, not running around the world starting new wars. Even Matt Walsh, the Daily Wire provocateur, snapped, saying he can't take the gaslighting, and demanding to know why conservatives who were anti-war just last week are suddenly cheering for the military-industrial complex. Cognitive dissonance is shattering the Republican Party from the inside, but that hasn't stopped the bombs from falling. In perhaps the single most symbolic act of this entire conflict, the U.S. and Israel crossed a red line that even they should have known better than to approach. Early Tuesday morning, at roughly 3 o'clock a.m. local time, a joint airstrike completely destroyed a historic synagogue in the center of Tehran. Iranian officials and community representatives have confirmed that the Rafi Nia synagogue was leveled to the ground. This wasn't a military target, it was a residential place of worship. And to make the depravity absolutely undeniable, this strike happened during Passover, one of the holiest weeks in the Jewish calendar. The representative of the Jewish community in the Iranian parliament, Humayun Sameh Najafabadi, confirmed that no one was inside at the time, thankfully, but that the Torah scrolls, priceless religious artifacts, are now buried under the rubble. This act proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that the Zionist project has nothing to do with protecting Jewish people. It never has. It is a political, colonial ideology that has been rejected by practicing Jews worldwide for decades. Orthodox Jewish groups in New York and London have historically protested Zionism, knowing it twists their faith into a weapon of nationalism. And yet, the Israeli Air Force just bombed a Jewish house of God. Insert. Let me take a moment to educate you on the history here, because the mainstream media wants you to think that Jews and Muslims are natural enemies. They aren't. The Jewish community in Iran is one of the oldest in the world, dating back nearly 2,700 years to the Babylonian exile. They are not interlopers, they are indigenous to the land. For centuries under Persian rule, they thrived. And despite the propaganda you hear from Washington, the Jewish community in Iran today has protected parliamentary representation and lives with a degree of religious freedom that doesn't exist for Palestinians in the West Bank. For decades, the Zionist regime in Tel Aviv has tried everything to undermine the stability of the Iranian Jewish community. They have run espionage rings, attempting to recruit Iranian Jews as spies to turn the Iranian populace against them. They have tried to stoke sectarian violence and fear. And it's not just the Jewish community. Iranian musicians, like the celebrated artist Ali Gamsari, have been seen sitting on prayer mats in front of the massive Damavand power plant, which supplies half of Tehran's electricity. Gamsari played a traditional tar, a long-necked string instrument, while looking directly into the camera, stating he hoped the sound of his music could help keep the lights in the homes from going out. These musicians, these artists, these Jewish elders forming those chains are making a calculated, brilliant move. By placing civilian bodies on the target list of the U.S. Air Force, they are daring Trump and Netanyahu to commit a war crime on live television. They are documenting that these are civilian objects protected under the Geneva Conventions. It is the ultimate moral victory. And the desperation coming out of the White House shows they don't know how to respond to a population that refuses to be terrorized. And that brings us back to the breaking news, and that is Pakistan isn't just walking away quietly. They are taking a military position against Israel. This is the nightmare scenario for U.S. Central Command. You now have a nuclear-armed power with a massive army directly opposing the Zionist project in the region. We are watching history change in real time. If you want to see more updates on the human shields at the power plants or Pakistan's next move, make sure you are subscribed and have your notifications on. We will not look away.
¿Quieres aprender inteligencia artificial avanzada en una universidad española 100% online y con los mejores profesionales?
Okay. So before we go on to the next video, I just want to make a comment that facilitates the understanding of what's going on. there is a how you say it, a give and go, a give and take, and the idea that this troglodyte white boy has the gall to do what he's doing only feeds into the ultimate error that pride comes before the fall. It never fails. And so when we are looking at this white boy being represented by Trump and his MAGA base and the other white so-called people across the globe, France and Australia and Canada, you can't help but to see the ridiculousness of these people. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Period. End of the story. There's nothing else to be said. And so when I'm saying this, and everything else that I have presented on my show, you can't help but to see the ultimate destruction of these people. The handwriting is on the wall. You reap what you sow. The sons of the father and mother are always visited upon their children, and there is no escape. They painted themselves into the corner like scared little bitches, and this is the result. So now we're going to go into 5 weeks in, zero progress. How the Iran war became America's most expensive mistake. I'll let the people explain.
States launched what was supposed to be a swift, decisive military strike against Iran. The Pentagon told Congress it would take 4 to 6 weeks. Clean, fast, overwhelming. American and Israeli jets would destroy Iran's air defenses, wipe out its nuclear program, and force Tehran to the negotiating table before most Americans even had time to form an opinion about it. That was the plan. Here is what actually happened. 5 weeks later, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Oil is still above $100 a barrel. 13 American service members are dead. Iran is still firing missiles at Israel, at Saudi Arabia, and at American bases. The Houthis in Yemen opened a brand new front. Israel invaded Lebanon. A quarter of Lebanon's entire population has been forced from their homes, and the war that was supposed to be over by now is instead spreading across the entire Middle East with no end in sight. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how every promise made about this war has fallen apart, what it is really costing you right now, and why the next 7 days could determine whether this becomes the most expensive American military failure since Iraq. Let us start with the money, because that is where this hits home for every single person watching. The war has cost American taxpayers at least $18 billion in just 30 days. The Pentagon has already asked Congress for an additional $200 billion. To put that in perspective, the entire annual budget for the Department of Education is about $68 billion. America has spent a quarter of that in 1 month blowing things up on the other side of the world. But the real cost is not in the Pentagon's budget. It is at your gas station. The national average for a gallon of gas just hit $3.96. In California, it is $5.81. Gas prices have jumped more than $1 in a single month. That has not happened since the oil crisis in the 70s. And here is the thing that most people do not realize. Gas prices are just the beginning. When diesel gets expensive, trucks cost more to run. When trucks cost more to run, everything they deliver costs more. Your groceries, your Amazon packages, your building materials, your heating bill, it all goes up, not in some distant future. Right now, this month, this week, the war is already in your wallet, and it is getting worse every day the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. Now, here is the part that should make you angry regardless of which political party you support. The people who planned this war told America it would be quick. They said Iran's military would collapse under the weight of American air power. They said the regime would fall apart once the supreme leader was killed. They pointed to how fast Saddam Hussein's government crumbled in 2003 and said Iran would go the same way. But Iran is not Iraq, and anyone who spent 5 minutes looking at a map could have told them that. The air campaign has been devastating by any measure. In the first 100 hours alone, America spent $3.7 billion on precision strikes. They destroyed air defense systems, nuclear enrichment facilities, weapons factories, and military headquarters. They killed the supreme leader. They killed the head of the armed forces, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard, the defense minister, and roughly 40 other top officials. Israel struck 170 targets in a single 24-hour period. By pure military math, the campaign has been one of the most destructive in modern history. And yet Iran is still fighting. Not just surviving. Fighting. Firing missiles that are hitting targets. Iranian rockets struck a Saudi airbase and destroyed an American E-3 Sentry aircraft, one of the most sophisticated and expensive radar planes in the entire military, worth about $270 million. That single hit was a louder message than 100 speeches. Iran can reach American assets. Iran can hurt them. And Iran is not stopping. This is where the conversation about the war fundamentally changed. In the first week, the debate was about whether the strike was justified. By the second week, it was about whether Iran could survive. By the third week, it was about the oil prices. Now, in the fifth week, the debate has shifted to something nobody in Washington wanted to discuss. The question is no longer whether America can defeat Iran. The question is whether America can afford to keep trying. The Pentagon is burning through roughly $1 billion a day. Some estimates put it closer to $2 billion. That is non-sustainable. Even for the richest country on earth, there is a limit to how long you can spend $1 billion a day on a war that is not achieving its goals. But the financial cost is only half the story. The strategic cost might be worse. Before this war started, America had a simple and extremely powerful position in the Middle East. It controlled the seas. Its navy guaranteed that oil flowed freely through the Strait of Hormuz. Its bases in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait projected power across the entire region. Countries in the Gulf trusted that the American military umbrella would keep them safe. That trust is now cracking. Saudi Arabia had 10 American soldiers wounded on its soil when Iran struck Prince Sultan Air Base. Kuwait had its international airport hit by a drone. The UAE has been shutting down gas facilities. These countries signed up to host American bases because they believed those bases would protect them, not turn them into targets. And then there is the diplomatic disaster. America told the world this would be a quick operation to neutralize Iran's nuclear threat and reopen the strait. 5 weeks later, the nuclear facilities are damaged, but Iran's knowledge and capability have not been erased. You can bomb a building, but you cannot bomb an equation out of a physicist's head. The strait is still closed, and Iran has turned it into a political weapon, letting friendly countries like China, Russia, India, and Pakistan send ships through while blocking American allies. This was never in the Pentagon's war plan. Nobody planned for Iran to weaponize an international waterway as a loyalty test that splits the world into two camps. The human cost keeps climbing too, and this is the part that gets buried under the headlines about oil prices and military strategy. Nearly 2,000 people have been killed in Iran, over 1,000 in Lebanon, 17 in Israel, 13 American service members, 93,000 civilian buildings damaged in Iran, 1 million people displaced in Lebanon, a quarter of the entire country, a United Nations peacekeeper killed. And last week, Trump threatened to destroy Iran's desalination plants, the facilities that provide drinking water to millions of people. Legal experts immediately called it a potential war crime. You cannot deliberately target water infrastructure that civilians depend on to survive, but the threat was made publicly on social media by the President of the United States. The administration promised this war would not become another forever war. They specifically used that phrase. Those were the exact words. But here we are in the fifth week, and instead of winding down, the war is expanding. The Houthis started firing missiles at Israel from Yemen. That is a completely new front that did not exist when the war began. Israel invaded Lebanon and is building what analysts are calling a second Gaza, a permanent military occupation of southern Lebanese territory. Hezbollah is firing rockets into northern Israel daily. Iranian-backed militias are attacking American bases in Iraq. Each of these fronts costs money, requires troops, demands attention, and makes a clean exit harder. This is exactly how Afghanistan started. A quick strike turned into a long war, turned into a 20-year occupation. The pattern is so familiar it is almost painful to watch, and the people who promised this time would be different are running out of explanations for why it is not. Now, let us talk about what happens next, because the next 7 days are critical. Trump's deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz expires on April 6th. He has already given and then extended this deadline twice. If he extends it a third time, the threat loses all credibility. Iran will know it can wait America out indefinitely. But if he follows through and starts destroying power plants and oil wells, the war enters a completely different phase. 88 million Iranians lose electricity, hospitals go dark, water treatment stops. The humanitarian crisis becomes a catastrophe that dominates every news channel on Earth. And Iran has promised that if its energy infrastructure is hit, it will strike every American-linked energy facility in the Gulf, Saudi oil fields, Qatari gas terminals, UAE desalination plants. The war does not end. It doubles in size. Pakistan is trying to prevent that outcome. They are hosting what could be the most important diplomatic meeting in decades, bringing together representatives from Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and potentially the United States and Iran at the same table. Pakistan's foreign minister confirmed that both Washington and Tehran have expressed willingness to use Pakistan as a host for direct talks. If those talks happen and produce even a temporary ceasefire, the pressure valve gets released. If they fail, April 6th becomes the day everything gets worse. There is another cost that never makes it into the Pentagon briefing. The cost to America's reputation. For decades, the United States maintained its global influence partly through military credibility. When America said something would happen, the world believed it. When America set a deadline, countries took it seriously. This war has eroded that credibility in real time. Trump set a 48-hour deadline for Iran to reopen the strait. Iran ignored it. He extended it by 5 days. Iran ignored that too. He extended it again to April 6th. Every extension tells the world that American threats can be waited out. Every unfulfilled deadline tells allies that American promises have an expiration date. And every week the strait stays closed, despite American naval power tells rival nations that the most powerful military on Earth can be neutralized by a country closing a narrow waterway and daring America to do something about it. Think about what that means beyond the Middle East. Taiwan is watching. If America cannot force open a strait against Iran, can it protect the Taiwan Strait against China? Ukraine is watching. If American military power is stretched thin across 5 fronts in the Middle East, what does that mean for continued support against Russia? NATO allies in Europe are watching. If America's own war is going sideways, how reliable is the American security guarantee that the entire Western alliance is built on? The damage to American credibility is not something you can measure in dollars, but it might end up being the most expensive consequence of this entire war. The deeper question that nobody seems willing to answer honestly is whether this war was ever winnable in the way it was sold to the American public. You can destroy a country's military from the air. America proved that in the first week. But destroying a military and winning a war are two completely different things. Winning means achieving your political objectives. The objectives were to eliminate Iran's nuclear capability, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and force a change in Iranian behavior. 5 weeks in, Iran still has the knowledge to rebuild its nuclear program. The strait is still closed on Iran's terms, and Iranian behavior has not changed at all. If anything, Tehran is more defiant now than it was before the first bomb fell. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, the man who manages more money than anyone else on the planet, said this war ends in one of only 2 ways. Either there is a quick peace deal that drops oil back to $40 a barrel and triggers a global economic boost, or the war drags on, oil hits $150, and the world slides into a recession that could last years. There is no middle ground. The longer the war continues, the more likely the second scenario becomes. Every day the strait stays closed, the world loses 20 million barrels of oil per day. That is the biggest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. bigger than the Arab oil embargo in 73, bigger than the Iranian Revolution in 79, bigger than anything the world has ever experienced. There is also something quietly devastating happening inside the American military that does not get enough attention. Equipment is being used up at an extraordinary rate. Precision-guided missiles that take months to manufacture are being fired daily. Interceptor missiles used to shoot down Iranian rockets are some of the most expensive munitions in the American arsenal, and the stockpile is not unlimited. The Navy fired more air defense missiles in the past year against the Houthis alone than it had in the previous 30 years combined. Now add the Iran campaign on top of that. At some point, you start running low on the very weapons that make American military superiority possible. Replacing them takes time, manufacturing capacity, and money that was not budgeted for a war nobody officially planned to fight. The troops themselves are feeling the strain. Sailors on ships deployed to the Red Sea and Persian Gulf have been on extended deployments, some for months beyond their scheduled rotation. The constant threat of missile and drone attacks means being on alert around the clock. Military families back home are dealing with uncertainty, delayed homecomings, and the stress that comes with watching the news and wondering if their loved one's base is the next target. 13 families have already received the worst possible news. And every day the war continues, the risk of that number growing gets higher. And through all of this, China and Russia are watching. Not just watching, benefiting. Chinese and Russian ships are sailing through the Strait of Hormuz while American allies are locked out. China is buying discounted oil from whatever sources it can find while American consumers pay record prices. Russia's economy, which was being crushed by Western sanctions over Ukraine, is getting a lifeline from rising energy prices. Every dollar that oil goes up is a dollar that flows into Moscow's war chest. The countries that were supposed to be weakened by American power are getting stronger, while America spends $1 billion a day on a war that has achieved none of its stated goals. Is this what winning looks like? Or is America funding its own rival's recovery while draining its own treasury on a war without an exit strategy? The administration says the initial 4 to 6 week timeline still holds. They are now 5 weeks in. That means they have 1 week left to deliver on every promise they made. Reopen the strait, neutralize the nuclear program, end the fighting, bring the troops home in 7 days. While the Houthis are firing missiles, Lebanon is being invaded. Iraq is unstable. Oil is above $100, and Iran is publicly saying it will never accept humiliation. Let us also be honest about what this war has done to the American economy beyond gas prices. The stock market has been on a roller coaster since the war began, with investors swinging between hope that a ceasefire is coming and fear that the war is about to escalate. Goldman Sachs raised the probability of a recession to 30%, driven almost entirely by the oil shock. Interest rates are climbing, with 30-year mortgage rates hitting 6.38%, making it even harder for Americans to buy homes in a market that was already brutal. Small businesses that depend on affordable fuel and predictable supply chains are being squeezed from every direction. Trucking companies are passing fuel surcharges on to customers. Airlines are raising fares. Farmers are paying more for diesel to run their equipment, which means the food they grow costs more by the time it reaches your plate. None of this was in the sales pitch when this war was launched 5 weeks ago. If you think back to how this war was presented to the American people on day one, fast, surgical, overwhelming, and compare it to the reality on day 35. Expanding, expensive, inconclusive, the gap between promise and reality is staggering. This is not a partisan issue. This is a math issue. The numbers do not add up. The timeline does not work. And the bill is being paid by every American who fills a gas tank, buys groceries, or pays taxes. If you found value in this breakdown, share it with someone who deserves to understand the full picture. And if you have not seen our last video on why Iran says it is waiting for American ground troops and the trap that nobody is talking about, make sure to watch that one next. I will see you there.
Wow. All right, so we got 3 more YouTube videos that I thought were on point. And that video was very much on point because it tells you the idiocy of the alcoholics and the pedophiles that are running America and the world. They just do what they want to do when they want to do it, how they want to do it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But in the long run, it does matter because you lose all kinds of credibility. No one's going to want to be around you. Trump, except Bondi, all you bitches in Europe, you're done. There's nowhere in the world you're going to keep control of the world. The petrodollar is over. It is now the petro-yuan or whatever global south currency they're going to be sitting on top of all of that power. Political, economic, spiritual, and physical power. Oh, wow. But I'm good with it because white folks ain't shit. I'm good with it because white folks don't know what the fuck they're doing. I'm good with it because it is high time that evil has been replaced with good. Injustice has been replaced with justice. It's going to take a minute. I don't think it's going to take long. But it's going to take a minute to reorient the world on the map of justice, making sure that everyone that needs to be held accountable are held accountable. So now every empire that attacked Iran died there. Let's take a look at what Professor Jiang is saying.
Has either collapsed, retreated, or been permanently weakened. Every single one without exception. And I want to argue today using game theory and structural history that America is next. So let's begin. Let's go back and look at history carefully because history does not repeat itself exactly. But as Mark Twain said, it rhymes. And in the case of Iran, it rhymes very, very loudly. First, Alexander the Great. Everyone knows Alexander. He conquered Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia, which is today Iran. And people say, wait a minute, didn't Alexander actually win? Didn't he conquer Persia? Yes, he technically conquered Persia. But what happened next? He died at 32 years old. His empire immediately collapsed. His generals fought each other. The Macedonian Empire was finished. And in its place, who rose to power? The Parthians, Iranians, who then controlled the Middle East for the next 500 years. So the lesson here is simple. You can temporarily defeat Iran, but Iran defeats you in the long run. Second, the Roman Empire. The Romans were the greatest military power of the ancient world. Nobody came close. And the Romans fought the Parthians, the Iranians, for over 300 years. Julius Caesar planned to invade Persia, but was assassinated before he could. Emperor Crassus invaded and was destroyed at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE, one of Rome's greatest military defeats. Emperor Trajan invaded and technically won, but immediately had to retreat because of uprisings everywhere. Emperor Julian invaded in 363 CE and died in battle. 300 years of war, and what happened to Rome? Rome fell, while Iran, the Sasanian Persian Empire, was still standing. Third, the Arab Caliphate. People often forget this, but the Arabs did conquer Iran in the 7th century CE. Yet what happened? Iran absorbed the Arab conquerors. The Persians converted to Islam, yes, but they transformed Islam into something distinctly Persian. They gave the world Persian art, poetry, philosophy, and science. Within a few centuries, Iranian dynasties like the Buyids, the Samanids, and the Safavids were ruling again. Iran was never truly conquered. It absorbed its conquerors and made them Iranian. Fourth, the Mongols. This is perhaps the most dramatic example. The Mongols in the 13th century were the most destructive military force in human history. They destroyed Baghdad, wiped out cities across Central Asia, and killed millions. And yes, they conquered Iran, but again, what happened? The Mongol conquerors converted to Islam, adopted Persian culture, and became Persians. The Ilkhanate, the Mongol rulers of Iran, became patrons of Persian art and literature. Iran absorbed the Mongols. Fifth, the Soviet Union. More recently, in the 20th century, the Soviet Union occupied northern Iran twice, once during World War I and once during World War II. Both times they were eventually forced to leave. In 1946, Stalin refused to withdraw Soviet troops from northern Iran. This was one of the first crises of the Cold War, and the Soviets were eventually forced out. A nuclear superpower forced out of Iran. So this is the pattern. Let me be very clear about this because I want you to understand it deeply. Iran is not just a country. It is a civilizational force. It has been continuously inhabited for over 3,000 years. It has one of the oldest continuous cultures in the world. And throughout all of history, every empire that has tried to permanently subjugate Iran has failed. The empires fell, Iran survived. Now, I want to go deeper. I want to use game theory and structural analysis to explain why this pattern exists. Because this is not just luck or geography. There are specific structural reasons why Iran defeats empires. Reason one, strategic depth. Iran is a very large country, 4 times the size of Iraq, with a population of 90 million people. It has the Zagros Mountains in the west, the Alborz Mountains in the north, deserts, and difficult terrain everywhere. Napoleon famously said, "Never march on Moscow." He could have also said, "Never march on Tehran." Conquering Iran would require at minimum 3 to 4 million soldiers. The entire active United States military is about 1.3 million. So the math simply does not work. There is no scenario in which America has enough soldiers to control Iranian territory. None. Reason two, the inverted military pyramid. This concept is very important. In a normal military, you have a cost pyramid. At the base, the biggest group, you have infantry soldiers. They are cheap, flexible, and can go anywhere. Above them, you have armor and tanks. Above that, naval power. And at the very top, the most expensive and least flexible, you have air power. Wars are usually wars of attrition. To win a war of attrition, your cheapest and most flexible resource soldiers must form the base of your strategy. That is how every successful empire in history fought. But America has an inverted pyramid. Air power is at the base. Everything is built around air power. Why? Because of the military-industrial complex. Air power is the most expensive, generates the most contracts, and makes the most money for Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. So the entire American military strategy is built around selling expensive weapon systems, not around winning wars. That is why you have the F-35 fighter jet at $100 million each, taking 26 years to develop, and the Iranians shoot one down. That is why you have the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier at $13 billion, and it has to run away from the Persian Gulf 3 weeks after arriving. That is why you have the Patriot missile system, billions of dollars, and cheap Iranian drones fly right past it. The American military is not designed to win wars. It is designed to generate profit for the military-industrial complex. Against Iran, this is catastrophic. Reason 3, asymmetric cost exchange. This is perhaps the most devastating strategic reality facing America right now. I want you to really understand this because this is how Iran destroys empires today, not with swords or horses, but with mathematics. Consider this. One Iranian drone costs $50,000. One American interceptor missile costs between $3 million and $10 million depending on the system. So every time Iran launches one drone and America tries to shoot it down, America spends at minimum 60 times more money than Iran. 60 times. Now, Iran does not shoot one drone. Iran shoots hundreds of drones simultaneously, overwhelming American air defenses. We saw a single Iranian ballistic missile being targeted by 11 different American interceptors. All 11 missed. That is tens of millions of dollars in American ordnance gone to stop one missile. America is racing to accomplish its mission before it runs out of interceptors. Let me say that again. The most powerful military in human history is racing against the clock before it runs out of weapons. That is the reality of this war. And this is ancient Persian strategy. You do not fight the empire head on. You bleed it slowly, you drain its resources, you exhaust its will. This is what the Parthians did to Rome for 300 years. This is what the Iranians are doing to America today. Reason 4, the will to fight. This brings us to perhaps the most important strategic factor of all. I want you to understand something about Iranian civilization. This is not just a government fighting a war. This is a civilization that has been fighting for its survival for 3,000 years. In Iranian eschatology, in their religious understanding, this war against America and Israel is literally a war against the great Satan. This is existential. This is sacred. In any war, you need 3 things: unity, capacity, and determination. Iran has all 3. What about America? Only 40% of Americans support this war. The administration is asking for a $20 billion war budget from a Congress that is deeply divided. The Pentagon is afraid to report casualties because of political backlash. American soldiers are dying, and the government is hiding the numbers. The contrast could not be more stark. On one side, you have a civilization that has been preparing for this war for 20 years, studying American tactics, building drone factories, mapping every American base in the Middle East. On the other side, you have an administration that had no plan beyond the initial bombing and assumed Iran would simply surrender. They did not expect Iran to fight back. That is the level of hubris, of arrogance that we are dealing with. Now I want to discuss something very important. War is not just fought on the battlefield. War is fought across 4 dimensions: the military dimension, the economic dimension, the political dimension, and the narrative dimension. Here is the key insight. America is trying to make the political, economic, and narrative dimensions conform to its military strategy. Iran is using its military strategy to shape the political, economic, and narrative dimensions. These are completely opposite approaches, and Iran's approach is far more sophisticated. America's strategy is simple: bomb Iran into submission, force a surrender, install a friendly government, control the oil. That is the entire plan. To make this work, America needs the economy to stay stable, allies to stay loyal, and the media to stay supportive. But what is actually happening? The economy is being disrupted. Oil prices are threatening to go above $100 a barrel. Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, the largest asset management company in the world, the man who controls trillions of dollars, went on the BBC and said, paraphrasing, that if Iran maintains control of the Strait of Hormuz, we could see $150 oil for years. That means global recession. The head of the world's largest investment firm is on the BBC warning about recession because of this war. That is not a stable economy supporting military strategy. That is an economy being held hostage by Iranian military strategy. Iran's strategy is completely different. Iran's military moves are calibrated to achieve economic, political, and narrative goals simultaneously. They control the Strait of Hormuz, but strategically, Chinese ships pass freely because China is Iran's main oil buyer. Friendly nations like Qatar and Oman are accommodated. This is not random aggression. This is precise, calculated geopolitical leverage. Politically, Iran is splitting the Gulf states. Qatar and Oman are moving away from the American position. Even Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who wanted regime change in Iran, are now watching nervously as their water supplies and food imports are threatened. Narratively, Iran is winning global opinion. Large numbers of Americans are openly rooting for Iran in this war. That is extraordinary. That has never happened before in an American war. And it tells you everything about how the narrative dimension is going. Now, I want to discuss something even more important. This war is not just about Iran. It is about the entire architecture of American global power. At the center of that is the petrodollar system. Here's how it works. Since 1973, almost all oil in the world has been traded in US dollars. This was agreed between America and Saudi Arabia. The Saudis would sell oil only in dollars, and America would protect the Saudi regime because everyone needs oil, everyone needs dollars. This creates permanent global demand for the US dollar, which allows America to print money, run deficits, and finance its empire. Without the petrodollar system, America cannot afford its military. Without its military, America cannot maintain its empire. Now, what is happening in this war? The Strait of Hormuz, which Iran is now effectively controlling, carries 20% of the world's oil supply. Iran is demonstrating to the world that it, not America, controls the flow of Middle Eastern oil. Every day that this continues, the credibility of the petrodollar system is weakened. The Gulf states, the linchpin of that system, are under direct threat. The GCC gets 90% of its food imports through the Strait of Hormuz. Desalination plants, which provide 60% of GCC freshwater, are vulnerable to $50,000 Iranian drones. If those plants are hit, cities of 10 million people run out of water in 2 weeks. The Gulf states are terrified. A terrified Gulf state that can no longer guarantee its own survival may no longer be willing to recycle petrodollars into American stock markets and AI data centers. If that stops, the AI bubble bursts. The American financial Ponzi scheme unravels. This is how Iran destroys empires, not by conquering them, but by making the cost of empire unsustainable, by making the financial architecture of empire collapse from within. We have precedent for this. The Soviet Union did not lose the Cold War because America defeated it militarily. It lost because the cost of maintaining empire became unsustainable. Afghanistan was part of that. Iran may be America's Afghanistan on a much larger scale. Now I want to address why America cannot adapt to this situation. You might ask, if the situation is this bad, why doesn't America change strategy, negotiate, or find an exit? The answer is that the quality of American governance has collapsed. China just completed its 15th five-year plan involving 2 years of consultation, expert committees, think tanks across the country, and leading academic specialists. It is a detailed, serious, comprehensive plan for the future of 1.4 billion people. What does America have? The State of the Union has become a television show. There is no work program, no strategic plan, no analytical framework. The tariff war of 2025, which disrupted the global economy, was produced by 4 or 5 people with a one-page document that would not pass a first-year economics student. This is the same administration that decided to bomb Iran. No plan beyond the initial strikes, no strategy for what comes after, just an assumption, a delusional assumption, that Iran would simply surrender. Compare this to Iran. Iran has been preparing for this war for 20 years, 2 decades of planning. They analyzed the American military, mapped every American base, built drone factories, studied the psychology of American decision-making. They understood that America's political will is fragile, that America's manufacturing capacity is limited, and that America fears casualties above all else. They built a strategy around exactly those weaknesses. This is the difference between a civilization that has survived 3,000 years by learning from every attack and adapting, and an empire that has been dominant for 80 years and has forgotten how to think seriously about strategy. Let me now bring this all together. I want to give you my prediction, not as prophecy, but as an analytical framework based on structural history and game theory. I have made 3 predictions since 2024. First, Trump would win. That happened. Second, America would go to war with Iran. That happened. Third, America will lose this war, and this will forever change the global order. That is what I believe is happening now. Let me be precise about what I mean by lose. I do not mean that Iran will defeat America on the battlefield in a traditional sense. Iran cannot do that. America is still the most powerful military in the world. What I mean is this. America will find that the cost of continuing this war in money, political will, casualties, global reputation, and economic disruption will become unsustainable. America will be forced to retreat from the Middle East. When that happens, when the American empire retreats, 2 regional powers will remain, Israel and Iran. The Middle East will be reorganized around those 2 powers. Here is the deeper historical truth that I want to leave you with. Every empire falls. That is the lesson of history. Rome fell. The Mongol Empire fell. The British Empire fell. The Soviet Empire fell. Not because they were defeated militarily in one decisive battle, but because they overextended, because they could not sustain the cost of empire, because their internal contradictions, corruption, loss of purpose, and hubris caught up with them. America is experiencing all of these things right now. A military designed to generate profit rather than win wars. a government that cannot plan beyond the next news cycle, a political system so corrupted that $2 trillion disappears from the Pentagon budget and nobody is held accountable, a financial system so fragile that it depends on Gulf state petrodollars recycled into a stock market bubble. And Iran, ancient Persia, is simply doing what it has always done. It is waiting. It is bleeding the empire slowly. It is being patient because Iran has time. Iran has always had time. Iran has survived every empire that has ever attacked it, and it will survive this one too. Alexander the Great came to Persia, and his empire died with him. Rome fought Persia for 300 years and fell. The Mongols conquered Persia and became Persian. The Soviets occupied Iran and were forced out. And now America. The graveyard of empires is not Afghanistan. The graveyard of empires, the original, the oldest, the most patient, is Iran. That is my analysis for today. This is not prophecy. This is structural history combined with game theory. I want you to keep your minds open. I want you to question everything I have said. I want you to look at the evidence and think for yourself. That is what predictive history means.
Wow, that guy is really, really, really good, you guys. Professor, from what I've understood, he's not a real professor, but he is. He's way beyond a lot of people who fake like they're knowing about what is going on. But that guy is really, truly fucking good. Ah, boy. So we're coming down to the last two YouTube channels that I got, or videos. I just want to play them straight on out. I'll be right back. Trump panics at worst moment in war.
Moment of his catastrophic and unlawful war in Iran. Trump escalating this war to the point where some people are wondering if Trump intends to use nuclear weapons on Iran. And that is a distinct possibility after the post he just made where he threatened war crimes to obliterate the entire civilization of Iran if they refuse to negotiate with him. And Iran said, we're not going to negotiate with you ever again when you use that language. All communications, even through intermediaries, has totally been cut off after Donald Trump made a post about wiping out the Iranian people, the entire Iranian civilization, right after Donald Trump previously said, we're here to save the Iranian people. He says we're going to obliterate the civilization. Iran says there shall be no further even efforts to communicate through intermediaries, even to exchange messages, right? There's never been negotiations, according to Iran. There have been some messages that went back and forth through Pakistan. They said, stop talking to us after you made that post. And while Donald Trump made that post, the United States and Israel were striking in one of the largest escalations, striking Tehran, striking the Karg Island. Israel was striking train, rails over there in Iran as well, the railway system rather. Let me show you what Donald Trump posted earlier this morning. He goes, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. However, now that we have complete and total regime change, where different, smarter, and less radicalized minds prevail, maybe something revolutionary, wonderful can happen. Who knows? We will find out tonight. One of the most important moments in the long and complex history of the world, 47 years of extortion, corruption, and death will finally end. God bless the great people of Iran. So he says he will wipe out the civilization of Iran tonight, then says, God bless the great people of Iran. Now, even some of the biggest former sycophants of Donald Trump are calling for the 25th Amendment. Marjorie Taylor Greene says invoke the 25th Amendment. Alex Jones says invoke the 25th Amendment. It's actually a lot of people, far right-wing people, saying you got to get this guy out right now. Of course,
walking can make you feel older. Tai Chi chair helps you feel younger.
Just 15 minutes every morning to tone body. No.
Most people in the country who are thinking straight right now think that the 25th Amendment needs to be invoked and Donald Trump needs to be removed. But what he's bragging about right there is genocide, it's war crimes, and we need to call it out. After he posted that, and while the Israeli and U.S. strikes were taking place, some of the biggest strikes yet in the war, we now learned Iran said no communication at all, even through intermediaries. The Wall Street Journal, citing 3 Iranian officials, has said Iran has cut off communications with the U.S. as Donald Trump's strike deadline approaches. He calls it Bridge Day, where he's going to blow up all the bridges and power plants and all of the civilian infrastructure. Now, we're seeing in Iran, as I'm recording this, Iranians are forming human chains around power plants and bridges, as Trump warns a whole civilization will die tonight. Topsite has some of the video footage, so does Clash Report. You see a human chain has been formed on the White Bridge in Avaz in Iran. You see the Bisatan power plant in western Iran, people forming a human chain there. The Tabriz power plant in northwestern Iran. You know, what was fascinating may not be the right word about all of this. I was up all night thinking about today and Trump's deadline about wiping out the civilization of Iran, and I noticed that very early in the morning, like my time, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I saw this post from the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, and I thought it was a hopeful post. Reza Moghadam wrote, Pakistan positive and productive endeavors in goodwill and good office to stop the war is approaching a critical, sensitive stage. Stay tuned for more. So I viewed that post right there by the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, who is very influential in the power structure of Iran. I said, okay, there's an olive branch. Maybe there's a ceasefire. I never thought there could be, because Iran said, we don't want a ceasefire. They said, we want a permanent end to the war with security guarantees, reparations, full control of the Strait of Hormuz, and they want to keep their ballistic missile, Shahed drone, and FPV drone. So it would surprise me that a ceasefire could develop out of all of this. But, you know, hope springs eternal. And I saw this, and I said, maybe. And then within a half hour after that, I saw other breaking news, and I was up all night following this. Then it was like, huge explosions in Tehran as fighter jets fly above the Iranian capital. U.S. and Israeli strikes all throughout Tehran. Probably within about a half hour of Reza Moghadam posting that, where I'm like, maybe there's some breakthrough that I don't know is taking place. I'm like, well, J.D. Vance is in Hungary, glazing Viktor Orban and telling people you got to vote for Orban and trying to influence the Hungary election with Putin. But I'm like, I don't know, maybe hopefully there's peace. And then I see this, you know, more attacks, the U.S. and Israel attacks on Kashir and Parshin sites in Tehran. You can see it right here. And then, you know, then the Karg Island, reports of strikes all throughout Karg Island in the northern Persian Gulf, the home of the primary oil export terminal of the Islamic Republic. And then we started getting other messages out. The president of Iran, Pezeshkian, he wrote, over 14 million proud Iranians have up to this moment declared their readiness to sacrifice their lives in defense of Iran. I too have been and am and will be sacrificed for Iran. I will be a sacrificer for Iran. Then the Axios report that Donald Trump is the most bloodthirsty person anybody in the White House has ever seen. He's like a mad dog. He's bloodthirsty. White House senior officials are telling Axios. Hegseth and Rubio sound like doves compared to Donald Trump, who is outright bloodthirsty. Dominic Trippi writes that, and I don't disagree with this. Trump using a nuclear weapon is a distinct possibility right now. And Donald Trump now says, no, I'm not going to use nukes. You said you're going to end the entire civilization of Iran. How else can that be interpreted? The extremity of Trump's threats, coupled with his growing desperation to find a way out of the conflict, has increased fears that a volatile president could try to use nuclear weapons. Under the U.S. system, a U.S. president has sole authority to order a nuclear launch. To do so, he would summon a security conference call of the National Military Command Center, which would typically involve top officials such as the Defense Secretary, the Armed Forces Commander, but it would depend on who is available on such short notice. A military aide who is always close to the president would open the nuclear football, a briefcase containing nuclear strike options, as well as the codes to confirm his presidential authority. The only way to stop the order would be for those in the chain of command to deem it illegal. They, in my opinion, should be in everybody's opinion, have an obligation to declare this illegal. These are war crimes. Trump is threatening a Holocaust. I mean, he's saying it out loud. The Iranian embassy social media accounts are saying, don't play with fire. The Iranian embassy social media accounts say, solution, the 25th Amendment, Section 4. Who is the most hated person in the world right now? Then they write, Trump told, a whole civilization will die tonight. Then Iran writes, you and your allies will suffer an unforgettable hit from the ancient civilization of Iran, and Iran saying self-control is over, that if the U.S. goes along with the attacks that Donald Trump is threatening, Iran says that it has its missiles positioned and it is ready to force the Middle East to descend into total darkness and shut down as well the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is in the Red Sea. Already they control the Strait of Hormuz, but they're going to tell the Houthis, shut down the Bab el-Mandeb waterway, and they say, we're going to send the Middle East into complete darkness if you attack us like this. Senior Iranian sources tell Reuters that if the United States attacks Iran's power plants, the entire region will fall into darkness, threatening to attack energy infrastructure throughout the Middle East, adding that if the situation gets out of control, it will work with the Houthis to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Sources state that the threats by Iran were relayed to the Trump administration yesterday through both Pakistan and Qatar. Meanwhile, the IDF announced, as I'm reading this, that they've attacked 8 bridges in Iran today. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel says, today we attacked the railways and bridges used by the Revolutionary Guard. Also, senior Israeli officials telling their local media, Iran will burn. If the deadline is not met, Iran will burn. Meanwhile, notices are going out to anyone in the Middle East through any foreign embassy saying, shelter in place, things are about to escalate and get very, very dark and very, very bad. General Hertling, who you've seen on the Midas Touch network, he's saying, military commanders, you gotta stop him. You gotta step in. You've gotta stop him right now, immediately. End this right now. End this right now. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance is spewing Russian talking points during a visit that he's making right now to Hungary to help Viktor Orban, Putin's puppet, in Hungary. And he's just spewing exactly the Russian propaganda. You have the U.S. and Russia allied to try to prop up Viktor Orban with a concerted goal to destroy the European Union and to destroy NATO. And I'm not being hyperbolic. That's literally in the U.S. foreign policy doctrine that they say for 2026, 2027 is destroy the European Union by propping up basically people who are sympathetic to Putin. This statement right here is exactly what Putin says. Watch as J.D. Vance say, Ukraine is trying to rig the Hungary election. Here, play this clip.
Scribe makes step-by-step guides for any process with AI.
You know what's terrifying at work? When you start a new...
So to answer your question, yes, we're certainly aware that there are elements within the Ukrainian intelligence services that try to put their thumb on the scale of American elections, on Hungarian elections. This is just what they do. This is part of the cost of doing business within some elements of their system.
And then J.D. Vance says, I want to help Viktor Orban as much as possible in this election. This clip.
In support of Prime Minister Orban, because together the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Hungary have been able to do amazing things. And we're here because we want to celebrate those amazing things. We want to build upon those amazing things. And of course, I want to help as much as I possibly can the Prime Minister as he faces this election season, which I believe is happening in just about a week, the election to elect the next Prime Minister of Hungary.
And then J.D. Vance talks about how what's happened in this country, what's happened in the midst of the election, is so horrible. He's like, we see Brussels, meaning the European Union, is trying to interfere in Hungary's election. They're trying to put their finger on the scale, and we got to stop the European Union. So while all of this is going on, this is what he's saying. This is what J.D. Vance is saying. It's so embarrassing. To play this clip.
What has happened in this country, what has happened in the midst of this election campaign is one of the worst examples of foreign election interference that I've ever seen or ever even read about. The bureaucrats in Brussels have tried to destroy the economy of Hungary. They have tried to make Hungary less energy independent. They have tried to drive up costs for Hungarian consumers, and they've done it all because they hate this guy. But I think that what the people of Hungary, what I would encourage them to do is ask themselves the question, not who's pro or anti-Europe, not who's pro or anti the United States of America, but who is pro-you? Who is pro the people of Hungary?
We'll keep you posted every step of the way as we get more developments here on the Midas Touch Network. We'll keep reporting the truth. Hit subscribe. Help us get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber.
All right. So what we are seeing is, hold on a second, please. What we are seeing is diplomacy there in Hungary and throughout Europe, whereby now, you have the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, there talking about diplomacy and fairness and elections or whatever else might be happening. But I think, and you can probably, check me on this one, it's fair game now. Europe is no more. They have no bargaining chip worth talking about. No gold, no oil, nothing. Just a dead currency and dead political entities that are trying to muscle their way into the future, and it's not going to work. So what this leads to is the final YouTube video, the original Arabs were black. The evidence is undeniable. So how does this all round about and go back to the beginning? Because blackness is the root of everything. And whether you're talking about Hungary, whether you're talking about Paris, whether you're talking about the United States or the North America or Americas, you get to the root of it all, and it is blackness. Black people are the indigenous people of the planet. Everybody comes from us, which means everybody is black. But due to the ignorance of the troglodytes, separating the human family into these staticky, nonsensical races, you will find that it doesn't uphold. You always and you must pay tribute and honor to the root. I'll be right back.
Some hot day in the broad desert. In the distance, a group of warriors rode under the rising sun, fearless, disciplined, and determined. Their skin darkened against the racing light as though defiant. Their hair curled tightly beneath their helmets. Their language was early Arabic, sharp and rhythmic. They were not strangers to this land. They were the land. These men led caravans across the Arabian deserts when most of the ancient world feared the sand. They controlled the trade routes that carried incense, gold, and spices between Africa and Asia. They fought wars, defended their tribes, built kingdoms, guarded sacred shrines, and commanded respect across the Arabian Peninsula. These were the early original Arabs, and something about them is rarely discussed today. Many of the earliest descriptions of Arabs, written by ancient historians, travelers, and even early Islamic scholars, describe them as dark-skinned people, closely related to the populations of the Horn of Africa and the Upper Nile. In simple words, the earliest Arabs were black.
If you're not flirting, you're friending. This is where most guys go wrong with women, because...
But this history has been blurred over centuries by migration, empire, politics, and changing identities. And that is exactly what we are about to uncover. Before we go further, if history like this sparks your curiosity, you should join our WhatsApp channel, because some conversations simply don't survive well on YouTube. On the channel, we share deeper historical threads, controversial documents and forgotten sources, polls and debates that challenge popular narratives, and stories that platforms often bury. It's a place for people who want the full history, not the edited version. If that sounds like you, then the link is in the pinned comment. Join us there. Now, let's go back to the desert. So why do some historians say the original Arabs were black? To understand this, we have to go back thousands of years, long before modern national borders existed, long before the kingdoms we recognize today. Arabia was part of a cultural and human corridor between Africa and Asia, and the people who first lived there looked very different from how many imagine them today. The earliest historical descriptions, ancient writers left clues. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, described many Arabian and nearby populations as dark-skinned and closely connected to Ethiopians. In his book The Histories, one of the earliest surviving works of history from the ancient world, he used the Greek term Aethiops, meaning burnt-faced, to describe dark-skinned peoples living south of Egypt and across the wider southern regions known to the Greek world. He also placed the regions along the southern Red Sea, including parts of Arabia, inside the same connected world as northeastern Africa. In other words, from the very beginning of recorded history, Arabia's southern populations were already being described as part of that same darker southern zone. You see, in the ancient world, the word translated today as Ethiopian did not refer to the modern country alone. Greek writers use Aethiops as a broad geographic label for darker peoples living across the southern frontier of their known world, stretching from the upper Nile through the Horn of Africa and across the southern Red Sea, including the Arabian side as well. So when ancient readers encountered this word, they would not have imagined Africa alone. They would have understood a much larger southern world of dark-skinned peoples that reached across both Africa and Arabia. Centuries later, historians were still making the same observations. The Roman historian Strabo also wrote about the physical similarities between people in southern Arabia and those in Africa. In his work, Geographica, a large survey of the known world, written during the early Roman period, he described the populations living along the southern Red Sea on both the Arabian and African sides as closely related in appearance and lifestyle. He presented evidence that this sea was not a boundary at all, but a corridor linking communities that had shared movement, exchange, and ancestry across its waters for centuries. Later summaries of earlier historical knowledge continue to point in the same direction. Scholars compiling traditions about Arab origins repeatedly associated the earliest Arab populations with the far south of the peninsula, especially regions closest to the African coast. Even 19th century scholarship preserved traces of this same understanding. The 9th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica identified southern Arabia, especially Yemen, as the cradle of the earliest Arabs and emphasized its long-standing connection with the African side of the Red Sea. Some observers also noted that the earliest inhabitants of southern Arabia appeared darker than later populations. The explorer Bertram Thomas, after studying southern Arabian communities and earlier remains, concluded that parts of Arabia had originally been inhabited by darker populations, before later migrations reshaped the appearance of the peninsula. This was not surprising. The Red Sea separating Arabia and Africa is incredibly narrow in some places, only a short distance by boat. For thousands of years, people moved back and forth across it. And once we understand what early writers were already seeing, the next question becomes unavoidable. How far back does this connection between Arabia and Africa actually go? Arabia's deep African connection. Modern archaeology shows that the Arabian Peninsula was never isolated. Early human migrations moved from Africa into Arabia tens of thousands of years ago. Some of the earliest modern human remains outside Africa were found in the Arabian region. Genetically, Many ancient populations of southern Arabia show strong ties to populations from the Horn of Africa.
Men don't
Hold on.
scroll, masturbate, drink, and smoke because they're lazy. They do it because their overstimulated brain is.
Modern genetic studies support this long-term connection. For example, the mitochondrial DNA study, Ethiopian mitochondrial DNA heritage, tracking gene flow across the Red Sea, identifies shared maternal lineages linking populations in Ethiopia with those in Yemen. This showed that movement between the two regions did not happen just once in the distant past. It happened repeatedly across long stretches of history. Another study published in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology, titled Mitochondrial DNA Reveals Distinct Evolutionary Histories for Jewish Populations in Yemen and Ethiopia, reached the same conclusion. It showed that populations moved back and forth between southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa, not once, but repeatedly, across deep stretches of history. And this connection was not just visible in genetic evidence. Places like Yemen and Oman historically had populations that early writers described as dark-skinned and African-looking. Travelers who visited the region noticed it too. The 18th century explorer Karsten Niebuhr, who documented communities in Yemen during his Arabian expedition, described strong physical and cultural links connecting populations living on both sides of the Red Sea. And even today, certain communities in these regions still preserve these older features. What makes this connection even more striking is that early Arab scholars themselves also left descriptions recognizing this darker diversity within Arabia. Some early Islamic historians also acknowledge the darker complexion of many early Arabs. The famous scholar Al-Jahiz wrote openly about the physical appearance of different Arab and African peoples, and he pointed out similarities between them. He described darker skin as a natural feature shared across regions connected by climate and geography, not something foreign to Arab identity. Centuries later, Ibn Khaldun offered a similar explanation. He wrote that climate shaped complexion across large parts of the world, including Arabia and Africa, and he treated darker skin in southern regions as part of a normal human pattern rather than an exception. These were not isolated opinions. They reflected what many scholars clearly recognized. Darker complexions had long been part of the natural appearance of many Arab populations. Other early Arabic sources reinforced this picture of how Arabs understood their own appearance. The 9th century scholar al-Mubarak preserved a striking description from Fadl ibn al-Abbas, a cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, who once referred to himself as the Green One. At the time, this expression did not mean the color we think of today. It was a poetic way of describing a deep, dark complexion, like the rich color of a fertile oasis or a healthy date palm. Al-Mubarak explained that many Arabs of that period took pride in darker skin and sometimes contrasted themselves with lighter-skinned Persians and Romans.
Hello, this is Mike. I'm professional with ice machine. Here I'm making a video to show a tent.
Early Arabic poetry preserved the same memory. The pre-Islamic hero Antar ibn Shaddad, whose mother was Ethiopian, was celebrated across generations as a symbol of courage and honor, and remembered in later tradition as the Black Knight. His story was not treated as unusual. It became part of the shared heroic tradition of Arabia. These accounts were not written centuries later to make a point. They reflected how early Arabs understood themselves at the time. And even more importantly, these descriptions were rooted in traditions that stretched back into the much older southern Arab civilizations that shaped the peninsula long before Islam. The southern Arab kingdoms. Long before Islam, powerful kingdoms already existed in southern Arabia. One of the most famous was the kingdom of Saba, the civilization often associated with the legendary Queen of Sheba. These southern kingdoms controlled major trade routes linking Arabia, Africa, and the Mediterranean world, which helped maintain constant contact between populations on both sides of the Red Sea. Archaeological evidence also shows deep trade and cultural connections between Saba and African kingdoms, like the kingdom of Aksum. Inscriptions written in the South Arabian script have been discovered on both sides of the Red Sea, and shared architectural styles and trade records link sites in Yemen with Aksumite centers in present-day Ethiopia, and Eritrea. These ties were so strong that, at one point, Aksum even ruled parts of southern Arabia, leading to centuries of population mixing and cultural influence. So, with all of these deep African connections clearly established across history, archaeology, and tradition, an important question remains. How do we move from a time when many Arabs openly took pride in darker skin to a world where the idea of a black Arab seems shocking to some people? How the image of Arabs changed. The answer lies in a series of changes that happened slowly over many centuries. As populations moved across Arabia, new tribes entered the peninsula from the north and the west. Some of these groups had lighter complexions, and over time they became part of the growing Arab identity. Later, as the Islamic world expanded far beyond Arabia itself, Arab rulers formed families with women from many different regions, such as Persia, Turkey, the Caucasus, and parts of Europe. Across generations, especially among political and urban elites, these family connections gradually changed how many Arab communities looked. Little by little, the image of the typical Arab in popular imagination moved toward a lighter complexion, even though many of the older, darker-rooted Arab communities continue to exist across the peninsula and the wider Arab world. The cruel irony is that even as lighter outsiders rose in status, many native black Arabs were pushed downward in society. Over time, enslaved Africans were brought into Arab lands in large numbers, and dark skin gradually became unfairly associated with slavery. For example, a nobleman's son by a black concubine might be quietly looked down on, even if he was fully recognized as Arab. In this way, some of the original Arabs, those with the deepest roots in the peninsula, were pushed to the margins of their own history. Colonial-era racial theories later added another layer to this erasure. European writers began classifying Arabs as Semites, placing them inside the category they called the Caucasian race. In doing so, they often portrayed the ideal Arab as light-skinned or olive-skinned. Orientalist paintings and early Hollywood films repeated this image, and they rarely showed Arab leaders as dark-skinned figures. During the 20th century, some forms of Arab nationalism also adopted this lighter Mediterranean identity. Over time, the public image of the Arab became increasingly separated from its African connections, and black Arabs were further written out of the story. Inside the Arab world itself, these ideas about race began to take hold. Lighter skin became associated with status and beauty, while darker Arabs were often stigmatized. In Yemen, for example, a community of dark-skinned citizens known as the Akka were treated as social outsiders for generations. Still, this truth has not disappeared. It remains visible in the history, in the traditions, and in the faces of people across the Arab world, waiting to be recognized again. The original Arabs were black. It is a well-supported historical conclusion that corrects stereotypes and brings attention back to the full range of Arab identity and to the people who helped shape it from the beginning. After all, Arab civilization, like all humanity, began in Africa, and from that shared beginning came cultures, languages, trade networks, poetry, and faith traditions that spread across continents. Thank you for watching. Once again, if you want deeper breakdowns, real conversations, and discussions that go beyond what platforms usually allow, join our WhatsApp group through the pinned comment and be part of a community that continues exploring these topics together. See you there.
All right, we're into the X-Files. This is my X. I just want to focus in on what was not said, basically. And that is really and simply, hey, Brother Willie, I really appreciate you being here. You know that. You're not here now. I appreciate you. Being marginalized because of your skin color. It's not a color per se. It's what you are detecting with your eyes. But there's no such thing as a black man, a white man, red man, yellow man. You've been conned. And I covered this in my book, The White Man's Burden of Lies and Deceit 1 and 2. Humanity has been conned. the black race of people, if I can say that without being uh, um, sidelined, so to speak. We are the black universe filtered down in human form. That is the connection. We are the gods of the planet and of the universe, representing one and the same. Because it is said that if you are seeking the kingdom of God, it is within you. What is within you, it is outside of you as well. Within the universe, one and the same. There's a balance. And so what you heard was really simple to understand, is that the Arabs were black people. Now what happened is what later on these Cretans, better known as troglodytes, better known as Tamarus, overwhelmed that area and they became slaves, but they're not to the point of being kept down. They were able to become the chief of the Persian Empire or the Turkish Empire or the Mongol Empire, whatever the case may be. And they were able to strike a pact with the Persian wall or the Persia that was maintaining that wall, the Hadrian Wall, to keep them out of our black Holy Roman Empire. And so when that broke down, you find that they were able to manipulate and find their way throughout Europe and occupy our Holy Roman Empire, pushing that into France, and also the royal families. That's what happened. So we have to be aware of what is going on and what had happened. So as we move forward, I want to get into the X-Files and finding out Trump is a bitch. He's going to nuke or he's going to do whatever. He didn't do shit at 8 p.m. The countdown ended. And here, how in the fuck did this motherfucker become president? This motherfucker was never shy. He raped children. His wife fucked Epstein. He started a war to distract from the fact he's all over the Epstein file and he's guilty as fuck. Did I miss anything? This motherfucker. You're gonna see him kiss Bill Clinton and grabbing his dick. Hold on. If not tomorrow, it might be later on this week that he will be impeached. I think they're lacking two votes. And here is what could happen if a nuke were dropped on Tehran.
Reports suggest that if the war does not lead to a resolution, the United States could consider using a nuclear weapon against Iran. Some comparisons are being made with the atomic bombing, Hiroshima atomic bombing and Nagasaki atomic bombing, where the U.S. dropped nuclear bombs to force Japan to surrender. If a 15-kiloton nuclear bomb were dropped on a city like Tehran, the destruction would be catastrophic. A powerful flash of light would instantly appear, temporarily blinding people up to 30 to 35 kilometers away. In the immediate blast zone, within about 1 kilometer, everything living would be destroyed within seconds, and all buildings would be completely wiped out. Within 1 to 3 kilometers, the death rate could reach around 75%, with severe injuries and widespread destruction. Between 3 to 5 kilometers, thousands would suffer serious injuries, buildings would collapse, and fires would spread rapidly. At 5 to 8 kilometers, glass windows would shatter and many people would still be injured by the shockwave. Even up to 20 kilometers away, dangerous radioactive fallout could spread, causing long-term health risks and radiation exposure. Considering Tehran's population of around 9.5 million, hundreds of thousands could die instantly, and the total casualties over time could rise into the millions. This analysis is based on a relatively smaller 15-kiloton bomb. If nuclear weapons were actually used, bombs up to 1,000 kilotons could be deployed, leading to far greater devastation.
Boy, I tell you, this beast of a wannabe human being, the white boy, is an animal. Here, I like this guy because he's telling the truth. John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. The 2-minute video, I'll be right back. If you can't hear that, I'm going to put it into the chat. Hold on.
Says otherwise. To the facts of the industrial Translation: white people never just stole on white things house of slavery. It wasn't just labor. Sticky conditions. They stole labor rather than develop their own systems. They returned to Southeast Asia for raw materials instead of just producing them. They extracted multiple components. They still stole sources to this day.
I apologize for that, but like I said, I put that into the chat. So, hold on, let me see if it's there. Yeah, it's there. So if you want to take a look at it and listen to it, it is available. And now we're moving into breaking. Officially announced, Iran and the U.S., with Pakistan acting as mediator, have agreed to halt hostilities for 2 weeks. Iran has put forward a 10-point plan for full cessation of hostilities. But you got to remember, these motherfuckers lie, steal, connive. They're lying. There won't be no ceasefire. Not on Israel. They're going to still bomb the shit out of Israel. But we're going to see what happens with America and whether or not they break this ceasefire deal. And I think they will. And I think they're just going to, Iran is just going to go on and continue to do what they do. I hope. So, you know, Iran is not stupid. They went into the UN with peace on the table. And Israel and the United States bombed them anyway. So what makes you think they're not going to bomb Iran? Oh, man. Now here's the man who received $400 million from his father. He blew it all. He just stole from the American people $3 billion. 30,000 plus lives, 5 children, 3 baby mamas, 2 divorces, 130,000 in payment to porn stars, 34 felony convictions, 91 criminal charges, 4 indictments, 2 impeachment, 6 bankruptcies, 26 plus sexual assault accusation. Lila told 83 million defamation judgment, 5 million sexual abuse verdict, 1 fake university shut down, and 1 fake charity shut down. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. You got that goddamn right. How the fuck did this motherfucker become president? I could have done and would do a better job. And now here we go with the fake ass Jews. Hold on. They're stealing homes. Deed theft is happening right now through forged documents and fraudulent transfers. If your home isn't structured properly, it's vulnerable. Protect your home. Get status verified. FreedmenNation.org. This is why you need to get status verified. Stop deed theft, secure your legacy, preserve generational wealth. FreedmenNation.org. Now, this is wild. Hold on. I'm doing my show. Esto haciendo mi show. This is wild. China revealed mosquito-sized drone that can secretly spy anywhere, sparking global fear.
China has revealed a mosquito-sized drone designed for silent surveillance and covert military missions. China has revealed a...
Wow. Just imagine what they are doing. Now, since I am a Jew, a real Jew, to say that I'm a black Jew is repeating itself. It is understood that Jews are black, period. No more discussion about that, no more wondering about that, nothing. So, when our ancestors, the real Jews, converted the troglodytes into our way of life, better known as the Khazarians, in 1932, the Jews who made up only 1% of the world population, that was when they diverted, I guess I want to say, or hid the fact that the true Jews are black. So we're going to go on this basis that from 32 forward, the world knew to be known to be Jews were white. All right, but they're not. In 1932, the Jews who made up only 1% of the world's population accounted for 34% of the world's dope peddlers, 47% of robberies, 47% of crooked games of chance, 82% of international crime organization, 98% dealers in prostitution. Hold on.
In 1932, the Jews, who made up only 1% of the world's population, accounted for 34% of the world's dope peddlers and 47% of robberies, 47% of crooked games of chance, 82% of international crime organizations, and 98% of dealers in prostitution. The most common expressions in the jargon of international gangsters and criminals stem from Hebrew and Yiddish words. In 1932, the Jews...
15 planes have left Tel Aviv over the past 30 minutes. That was a while, a minute ago, maybe a day ago or 2 days. The Israel government has fled. Something big is happening. Okay. And now, one of the things that I was focused in on about 6 months ago, SABN, African breaking news, something African breaking news. I forgot what the S stood for. But now, since Africa has united itself, it's from a one continent with 55 countries. It is called now the African. The United States of Africa, with its own coin that is backing its currency, the Africoin. And now you have the Global South with its own coin called the unit. And now, since and after the war with Iran, the petrodollar is no more. We are now looking at the petro yuan. And if you ask me, I am going to tell you that the petro yuan is going to take effect for a minute. Then that's going to be passed on to whatever the currency of the ruble, Russia will be petro ruble, and then they're going to change to permanently, I do believe, to Mother Africa's, the petro Africoin. If your money is not backed by gold, which America is not, and Europe is not, you're in trouble. And so while the world burns, Africa builds. Then go to refinery, steps up. 17 cargoes of gasoline shipped across Africa, urea export rising. Supply crunch easing. The Iran war disrupts. The West threatens Africa's supplies itself. This is sovereignty. This is resilience. This is the future of the empire fear. And this is the future the empire fears of America, for white people. No more begging, no more waiting. African solution for African problems. Aliko Dangote is not a politician. He is proof. He is a proof. Africa can stand alone. Share this. The continent is waking up.
Nigeria's Dangote refinery says it has increased exports of gasoline and urea to African countries hit by supply disruptions caused by the Iran war. Africa's largest refinery has been operating at its maximum capacity of 650,000 barrels a day. Owner Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest man, said the facility had shipped around 17 cargoes of gasoline to other African nations to cushion the impact of the crisis.
The challenges are many. One is of urea, which is fertilizer that we have. I think in the last couple of days we've been loading to mostly African countries, which we are not doing before. And then now is to do with also petroleum products, for which are now sending mainly to African countries.
Exports of urea fertilizer have also risen as buyers seek alternative sources for the product, much of which normally comes from the Middle East. Officials say the refinery can produce up to 3 million metric tons of urea annually, most of which is typically exported to the United States and South America. But despite the refinery running at maximum output, industry figures show fuel prices in oil-producing Nigeria have reached record highs. United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, on a visit to the facility, outlined the UN's role in alleviating challenges in the region.
I think the UN's job here is to amplify and to put visibility on the possibilities of mitigating a food security crisis, and this is one of them. I hope that when we go back, that we can continue to talk to the partners that will partner, the countries that should partner with the Dangote Industries.
Dangote said the refinery also hopes to secure more crude cargoes priced in local currency to help curb fuel costs.
Now, when I was focusing on and reporting about SABN, gold, mountain literally of gold were being found, 12 trillion, 20 trillion, $30 trillion of gold. You got to add in the equation Africa. Mother Africa is the richest resourced entity on the planet. 80% of America's military depends on its resources. Without it, there's no military. You can literally strangle the shit out of America by not giving the resources it needs for its military. Period. Now here, remember you're not native to any land but the hills and caves of Europe, talking to white boy.
Tell us, go back. Please remember where you came from. And when you want to relegate somebody to a specific place, just remember what your origin is in this world. Please, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I want you to understand that you, wherever you are on the earth, you're not a native anywhere. You came there and took it from the native people who are there. So please don't talk about going back, because if others talk to you about that, where would you go?
Now, this is the white boy talking to a brother. He's just being straight up and plain about it.
You studied your history, and you did not take over this country by singing "We Shall Overcome." You did not gain control of the world like you have it now by dealing fairly with a man and keeping your word. You're treaty breakers, you're liars, you're thieves, you rape entire continents and races of people. Then you wonder why these very people don't have any confidence or trust in you. Your religion means nothing. Your law is a farce, and we see it every day. You demonstrated it in Alabama. And I can say you, because you're part of the whole system, you profit from it. In fact, you make your living from it. You couldn't walk around and talk to people, stand up in your pulpit on Sunday and preach nice little songs and say, now we're going to give thanks to the Lord for he is good and old Jesus be among us. As far as we're concerned, your Jesus is contaminated, just like everything else you tried to force upon us is contaminated. So you can have him. And here's what I'll say. I wish you would follow Jesus like we followed him. Because if you did that, then we'd be in charge tomorrow. We studied your history, and you did not take over this.
Where is the lie? And now you're talking here, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. You must become like your natural enemy, cruel and merciless. Well, we are. We know who these people are. We had to kill them and get them out of Egypt. We civilized these people 3 times. We killed them and got them out of Egypt, out of Greece and Rome, and now after 1492, out of Spain after civilizing the uncivilizable animals 3 times. We understand that we must be 1,000 times worse than them, and we are. But we have a side to us that is soothing. Now you have statement by Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The United States has accepted a humiliating defeat and agreed to all of Iran's ceasefire conditions as a basis for future negotiations. Let's see what they are. Commitment to non-aggression. Number 2, continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. 3, acceptance of uranium enrichment. 4, lifting all primary and secondary sanctions. Termination. Number 5, termination of all resolution of the UN Security Council and the IAEA Board of Governors. 6, payment of compensation for Iran. 7, withdrawal of American combat forces from the region. And 8, cessation of war on all fronts. And a fucking reparation going to be about $2 trillion, if not more. We already did this one, so we'll move forward. And we're running down here, so we're running to the last of the X-Files. So now we have here the white males. 29% of the population, 69% of the rape arrests were white, 65% of arrests for offenses against family and children were white. 59% of violent crime arrests overall were white. Prostitution and vice, over 50% of arrests were white. White males are 29% of the population in 2019. They were arrested for 57% of all violent crimes, 70% of sex offenses, 66% of forcible rapes, 58% of aggravated assaults, 42% of all murders. I think these figures go a lot higher. 91% of familicide, 53% of serial killers, 62% of mass killing. And I don't even know what the hell this is. That's all.
آخر الوثائق المسربة تعلن مثل
So you can see Trump and Bill Clinton kissing.
ترامب وأبستين. مساء اليوم كشفت مصادر إعلامية عن تسريب ملفات
You should know by now that this white boy has no business running a motherfucking thing. He's incompetent and at best mediocre. They have a culture of violence, of stealing, of lying. And you mean to fucking tell me, you dumb motherfuckers, want to have this bitch and bitches like him continue to run the world? This is the very reason why we are in the hot mess we're in. This is the very reason why this world has been turned upside down, because this white boy, who is not a man, has made good, bad, bad, good, justice, injustice, injustice, justice. That's it. There's no more to talk about. And so now, for the next 24/7, 365, stay black. Stay black. Stay black.